And so you can't just say your migraine stems from your tinnitus. The question I always have veterans answer, and I'm going to kick it back to you, is the question is, does your migraines stem from your tinnitus? It's not a one size fits all. This is a snapback, okay? Someone with a big head can wear it. Someone with a small head can wear it. Tinnitus secondaries is not a snapback, okay? So does your migraine stem from your tinnitus? It doesn't matter what Bob's is. It doesn't matter what Joe's are, okay? It's individual basis, and people forget that all the time. All right, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I wasn't really thinking about that in this moment. But yeah, it's really irritating. And I think that we, honestly, you and I, do a pretty good job about going, look, it's nuanced. Don't go chasing claims just because somebody says this will get you that. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's your life, right? Everybody's situation's different, and go after and get rated appropriately for your own conditions. So with secondaries are huge, by the way. Because that is really for most people. Okay. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule. There's people that go, hey, I filed for 4 claims. I'm 100% right out the gate. Life is great, except for my conditions. But you get what I'm saying. So with secondary conditions, that is typically the way people are going to make it into those higher ratings, those 80s, 90s, 100%. And also, quite frankly, it is also something that can open up the door for tdiu. Somebody who's sitting at a 30 or 40, now they file in a couple more secondary conditions. It pumps them into the area or the arena for tdiu, which is also a great benefit that you can utilize by having those secondary conditions actually realized. Secondary conditions, in my opinion, really boil down to 2 things. And it's, look, what you're getting here is you're getting versions of the same thing from both of us, and hopefully it just kind of just cements things for people. The 2 things for a secondary, well, first, what you don't need for a secondary is you don't need to prove your time in service, right? So that's one. So the 2 things you need is, 1, a diagnosis. Just like with a regular service-connected claim, you need to actually have a condition. So you need a diagnosis of whatever you are going to utilize as your secondary condition that you're going to file for. So I have a condition I'm diagnosed for. Then the second piece is a nexus, but the nexus, like you had mentioned, Clay, shifts from your time in service to a service-connected condition. So you're tying it to that. Now, how can you do that? Well, what I tell people to do is, because again, it's very nuanced, it's more about giving people the tools to realize what they could actually file for instead of telling them what they could file for, especially when we can't actually have a conversation with somebody. So I'm not going to tell you that you can file for anything, right? What you should do is take all of your service-connected conditions, your direct service-connected, and Google search secondary condition to my condition that's service connected. See what pops up. Believe me, the Mayo Clinic, all these other places are going to VA lawyers, or veterans lawyers, veteran law lawyers, pop up with different things on their websites. Read through them. See what common things are. And if you actually have one of those conditions, you're in a good spot to get that service connected. Now, there may be other information out there, like, for example, I think it was the K2 veterans who had all that uranium deposits, right? There's no presumptive conditions for if you served there, but there is documentation and some released reports that show that there was like abnormally high uranium in that location. So if you can prove that you were there and you can get those reports that show it, right? You could actually utilize that as evidence. Now, I know I kind of got off track from secondaries, but the point is that do your research. Do your research on connecting this condition to this service-connected condition. Once you see that there's something there, even if it's a report or some sort of a study from some university, but like you said, Clay, there could be competing evidence somewhere else. The important piece is, are you going to supply more evidence? Or am I going to supply 3 layers of evidence that support my claim and they only find one against it, fine. I have a report from University X that says that it does connect. Fine. You found a report from University Y that says that it doesn't. Cool. Those wash. Now I supplied two more pieces of evidence that say that it does. I got a pretty good chance at winning, right? You want to work with your doctor. Whatever doctor actually diagnosed you with your secondary condition that you're going to file for, ideally, maybe they're involved with your first one too, but you want them to tie a nice bow around those, explaining that you have this condition that's service connected and that this condition, either because of its nature or because of the medication you're taking, has now caused this other condition for you, right? You want it black and white, very clear, very pointed, very yes, this caused this, period. End of story. Signed, Dr. So-and-so with love. Now you have that and you're going to supply that with your diagnosis, right? Diagnosis and a good letter and any other supporting documents that show that those things are connected in some way should be supplied. Now there's two things here, right? One, we're trying to get this rated as a secondary. Okay. That's a focus. That's you need that to happen. Then the next piece of it is you also want to make sure that it's rated appropriately. So make sure that when you're working with your doctor that you're actually reading, and if you don't understand it, that's fine. Print it out, take it with you to your doctor and show them from the schedule of ratings what levels of impairment are the VA looking at. And have that conversation with your doctor. If the doctor says, "Oh yeah, you meet all of these 5 things," great. Now I know that I meet all of these 5 things. I should be rated whatever 30% for that condition. Awesome. Can you put that in that letter? That same verbiage in that letter that ties these two things together. That would be great. Now you putting that effort and that energy up front is going to save you heartache later when you realize, oh, I was shortchanged by the VA. They lowballed me, blah, blah, blah. No, give them the information they need to give you the rating that you deserve, right? The appropriate rating. I'm never going to say that everybody should be the maximum. No, but you should be what you should be, right? And oftentimes we absolutely shoot ourselves in the foot at the C&P exam because we don't know what they're looking for. And so what's a doctor to do at a C&P exam? Well, I mean, they can't guess. So they're going to, well, I mean, they said kind of the minimum things. So here you go. I mean, you have the diagnosis. So you're automatically going to be, if you're going to be service connected or secondary service connected, and you don't give them all the evidence they need for the severity, you're automatically the lowest. You're automatically the lowest rating. So why not give them what they need? All right. That's my soapbox. I'm off of it.
Yeah, I want to, before we move on to aggravation, I want to bring up probably the most common competing evidence scenario, and that's sleep apnea and obesity. So I am 6 foot, okay, 6 foot flat, tall, handsome, right? At least that's what I like to
You
call
look
myself.
short.
No, I'm 6 foot flat. I'm
Wow.
185 pounds, 180 on a good day, 185 whenever I ate too much food, right? So I'm packing, right? I'm kidding. I'm saying that because if I had sleep apnea, which I don't, but if I was diagnosed with sleep apnea and I submitted sleep apnea secondary to anxiety or PTSD or whatever, the VA is unable to use obesity as a factor as competing evidence. Right now, let's switch that scenario. Let's say I'm 6 foot, 260, and I'm sitting like this and I'm huge. And I have zero evidence that indicates my obesity stemmed from service, so I can't use it as an intermediate step. Now, if I claim sleep apnea secondary to PTSD, the VA can say, hey, there is some correlation between PTSD and sleep apnea. That's good. However, you're 260 pounds. There's a causative relationship. So causative beats correlation every day of the week. And we're denying you based on obesity, right? And the rationale will put that in doctor speak much better than I just did. but that is the most common thing I see. And it's also a YouTube phenomenon where people will talk about sleep apnea secondary to PTSD because it is a 50% rating. It's high value. However, the question is, I go back to the question, does your sleep apnea stem from your PTSD, or is it related to weight? Is it related to some medication you're taking? And that's a two-way street, right? So if you're not obese, if you're taking gabapentin for a service-connected disability, if you were exposed to burn pits and had direct exposure over a long period of time, all those are factors for your case. And if you don't have those, there are also factors the VA can use. So just think of evidence, think of secondaries as, what are my arguments to Service Connect secondary? What's the VA's arguments to not Service Connect? And just understanding that baseline will help you gather evidence to say, hey, VA, I'm not fat, right? And I'm using that as a generality, but sleep apnea as the example, but that goes for every single claim there. Do you want to add to that, or do you want to move on to aggravation?
Let's move on to
All
aggravation.
right. I love talking about fat people and sleep apnea. That's a joke. You can hate me in the comments. That's fine. Okay. So